The basic building blocks of healing and taking a bold stand for your health. These are the two main topics we cover in part 2 of my interview with naturopathic practitioner Jodie Meschuk. She shares her story of helping her son heal after an autism diagnosis. And one of my favorite things that she said is this: when you stand in the gap, you are the brick wall between all the noise and your child that is counting on you to heal them. Your child is helpless. Your child is counting on you to stand in the gap and be a voice for them. Jodie is real and raw with us about how hard a healing journey can be, and it's such an impactful message. If you could take a second after you listen to leave a 5-star review on Apple or Spotify, or share the link with a friend, it would mean a lot to us. Enjoy the episode. Welcome to the Daily Wellness Podcast, where you can learn about healthy living and be inspired to take the next step in your wellness journey. So leading up to having an official diagnosis of autism, like what were some of the things, how old was he when you kind of got that official diagnosis, and what was that process like?
Yes. It's a little bit of a long process because there's a lot of pieces in there of me questioning, my parents trying to console me and say, he's going to be fine. He's just a boy. All that typical stuff that you go through when you're trying to figure out what the heck is going on and what do I do? Ultimately, one of my friends at the time actually intervened, and thank God for her, because we honestly wouldn't be here today if she didn't call me one day. She just called me and said, Jodie, this is going to be the hardest conversation I ever have with you, and we may not be friends after this. Can you imagine? I'm sitting there going, okay.
Yeah.
But I kind of, our intuition doesn't ever lie to us. And if we really sit still and listen to it, I actually knew what she was going to say to me. So I was very prepared for it, because I myself had been sitting there going, why can't somebody just validate what's going on with my child? Why can't somebody just validate me? Why is this so hard? And she was the first person that came along and said, I think you need to get your son tested, and here's what you need to do. And she was so great because she was super matter of fact, which is my style as well. And she just said, here's the number you're going to call. Here's the questions they're going to ask you. Here's how you're going to answer them. Wink, wink, right? Because it's a system. If you don't answer the questions the right way, your child's not getting help. So I fibbed and lied a little bit with a few things because I just knew that my child needed to get in immediately because I needed to know what was going on. I will say, though, that I actually have a different viewpoint nowadays depending on the child and the case, because I am a much bigger fan of not getting your child tested than getting into the system and what that can do to people. We've come a long way in 10 years, 15 years from where I was, to the fact that the way that you heal a child are basic building blocks, and you don't need to have a diagnosis for that. You don't need to have testing for that. You do need to get therapy for some kids for sure, but that is, a whole different thing. So it's interesting because at the time I felt like I needed that. And at the time you did need that to sort of open and crack the door open to therapy and services. But anyways, we went in and got him tested. He actually got tested the morning I went into labor with our second son. And so my parents actually had to take him. But you know what? It was the best thing to ever happen because they needed to see it with their own eyes. They needed to watch that process to be able to understand everything that I had been telling them for months. And it finally clicked for them when they saw it with their own eyes. And so here I am in the hospital giving birth to my second son. I'm like 1 foot now in Western medicine and 1 foot out. So I still have the hospital birth, but no epidural. And I didn't do any of the standard things in the hospital with him. So I was like getting there slowly. But yeah, so then he got tested and they put him in, or he was able to access therapy right away, which was good because he did need to get in and start working on his speech and OT and some other things. But honestly, like that was such a small percentage of the healing process. everything we did on our own, everything we did in the home, everything I did that people called me cuckoo for is what actually healed him. So.
Yeah. And how did you decide on a path of treatment at that point? If you were kind of like straddling the line of, I'm sure you were getting lots of recommendations of this is what you should do, this is what you need to do, and then doing some of your own research. So how did you decide like this is what we're going to do?
Well, that time period, so I already felt a sense of relief once he was able to get into some therapy because I thought, okay, it gave me a chance to breathe for a second. Also, I have this newborn.
Newborn, right? Yes.
Here I have a brand new newborn, and the timeline was very fast. I gave birth the day he got diagnosed and his assessment. He was literally in therapy the next week. They called me with the assessment results and said, hey, here's what we think is going on. We want to give you some time to think about it. I said, nope, don't need to think about it. When's your next availability? So I am with this newborn, and there were many, many days that I was dropping our second son off at my parents' house so they could watch him while I spent 8 hours a day in therapy with my son. Or I would take my second child with us and I would put him in the jogger and I would, do both at the same time. And we literally lived out of our car for a couple years. But at the time, this was still where Jenny McCarthy was having a bit of a voice in terms of autism and the lies surrounding autism and vaccines and vaccine injury. And so I basically used that kind of as a springboard of where to go research. And the thing that I kept finding as a common thread was just start with the gut. And so that made sense to me because I thought to myself, okay, well, if my child's not feeling good down here, like if his gut is literally on fire all the time, well, that's going to make his brain not think very well because there's this gut-brain connection that I was like, oh my gosh, I never knew about this. So it just made sense to me. It was common sense. And that's what I want to also encourage parents. Think with common sense. You guys, there's so much noise out there. I'm going to tell you, I'll admit it, there are 50 million people out there on Instagram trying to peddle their autism cures. You guys, it's simple. It's simple. You don't need to go and jump through 50 million hoops to heal your child. You just have to believe that you can do it and you have to do the hard work to do it. But it's actually very simple. You don't need to have this machine. You don't need to spend thousands of dollars on this over here. And we didn't have money. We did not have money to be able to do hyperbaric chamber and all of these things. So I just said, well, let's start with the gut. So how are we going to do that? And it was challenging because at the time, my son's diet was basically McDonald's chicken nuggets and yogurt is what he was eating every day. And I was giving that to him because I felt bad that my child wasn't eating. So again, what we do as parents is we go, oh my gosh, well, I need my child to eat. Oh, I tried to give him green beans. He threw a fit. Okay, we'll just go get McDonald's because I know he'll eat it. No, you are the parent. No, your child eats what you tell them to eat. And that's the hardest part is breaking through that healing of the gut to where it gets really, really hard in the beginning and you want to quit. But then all of a sudden, it's like the clouds break and the sun comes through and your child starts making improvements, but you got to get through that rough patch. So our biggest thing was the GAPS diet. And when I work with parents, there's not often a child that I see that can escape going on the GAPS diet because it really is the gold standard to heal the gut, along with raw camel milk, which I love. But we did the GAPS diet. It basically, this usually freaks parents out because I say, well, my child didn't eat for a few days. Okay, he didn't eat for a few days. Do you know how long you can go without food? Right? He was hydrated. He had nutrients in him, but he didn't eat because his gut was so on fire that you had to basically think of it like a cocaine addict. Mm-hmm. When somebody comes off addiction, what happens? Their body goes absolutely nuts because every neuron in their brain is addicted to that molecule. Their gut is connecting with that. So you start to take yourself off something. Even think about people who try to go off caffeine. They quit they quit because it's so hard. But that tells you the addictive nature of it on the brain and the body.
Yeah.
So I had to break that. And so it took a couple of days for his body to just kind of, almost think of it like it just releases those chemical attachments. And then all of a sudden one morning he gets up and he drinks his little cup of bone broth. And I go, all right, buddy, here we go. Right?
Yeah. I'm so glad you mentioned that, because I think even with someone that's not dealing with a diagnosis or something, and they just are struggling to get their kids to eat healthy food in general, like that is the battle. Like it's this cycle of, oh, I'm going to try and put something in front of them once or twice and they don't eat and we panic and we think that we're terrible parents. And so we give them what they want, or what they will eat quickly, and to make ourselves feel better.
Yeah, I think what really helps is, this is why it is important to have somebody walking beside you in this process, or like a coach or a mentor, or like what I do with clients, is because if you don't understand why that's happening, you're going to quit.
Mm-hmm.
But once you understand why it's happening, then you go, okay, let me give it another day. We can do this. My child will be fine. And then all of a sudden you see the other side of it and you go, oh my gosh, that was so worth it. And I was going to quit.
Yeah. And I think I would feel worse. Like you might feel bad for, making your kid eat healthy food for one meal, or, making them go hungry for a meal. But how bad are you going to feel like in the long run when the diet that you're feeding your kid makes them really sick?
Yeah. But that's assuming that parents understand that it's their child is eating that's making them sick.
Right.
And
yeah, so it's that education and understanding piece.
And again, the underlying root causes, again, going back, you have to go back on a timeline of your child's development, and you have to actually start with yourself. And you have to go, well, what state of health was I in when I was pregnant? Did I get duped into the Tdap or the flu shot? Well, guess what? Your baby just got exposed to that. There's no way around it. Or how did you eat? How was your gut health? The state, I can't stress this enough, that the state of the mother's gut health is actually what determines, when that child is born, the strength of their gut, because their gut is still going to be permeable and immature, but the strength of your gut almost propels them on a path of, hopefully being able to weather some of the normal things that come along for infants, or the normal viruses and bacteria and all of those things. So there's root causes there that are very hard sometimes for people to want to admit.
Yeah, true. Yeah, we have to get really honest and vulnerable with ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you share some other things? Like, what are some other things you've done? You mentioned the GAPS diet.
Yes. So we started with the GAPS diet. At the time, he was in a lot of speech therapy and OT. He was doing in upwards of, some days were 8 hours, some days were 6 hours, and that was 5 days a week. And then we made a really good relationship with a couple of the therapists at the center. And this is another little tidbit I'll just encourage parents is, you're the one in charge. Like, the problem is the gold standard today, just like pediatrics has said, oh, the gold standard is vaccines. Well, the gold standard for therapy is something called ABA, or applied behavioral analysis. That is probably one of the worst things that you can do for your child, is put them in ABA, but they're going to do that. They're going to force you to do that. They're going to say, well, that's all that's available. So what you have to do is you have to be really careful of who you're choosing for your child, and that you're the one directing what the goals are that you want. So I always recommend parents to go research Floor Time Therapy by Stanley Greenspan, and you implement floor time therapy, and you tell the therapist, no, I don't care what you've been trained in college. This is what I'd like you to do with my child. And if you're not willing to do that, then we're going to find another therapist. So you're always in the driver's seat, always. These therapy centers are not used to that. So just be ready that when you're the squeaky wheel, you're going to get pushback, but they have no legal authority to do that.
Yeah.
So we found a therapist there that we made a really good relationship with, and we actually just hired her on the side and said, hey, can you come to our house a couple days a week and work with him for a couple hours? So I always say, look for that opportunity too with parents, because therapy is important, but it's the right kind of therapy.
That's good.
So in the beginning, it was mostly food interventions and therapy. And that's actually where we saw a lot of the big initial gains, was just working on his gut and just helping his body to become more nourished and healing all of those holes that were happening in the gut. So going off gluten, going off dairy, soy, corn. I mean, basically eating keto in a way. And we did implement a few initial supplements. We saw a biomedical doctor at the time. It was one of Jenny McCarthy's doctors that she recommended because, of course, I wanted the best. But interesting, though, that I found, and this is why I caution parents that it's actually a very simple process that you don't have to spend thousands on, was we found ourselves 6 months down the road with 3 pages full of supplements that I was trying to give my son. And one morning I woke up and I looked at the refrigerator where all of his supplements were listed out so that if my parents were there, they knew what to do. If my husband was there, he knew what to do. And I looked at it and I just thought to myself, how can his body process all this? And so that's when it hit me. We're doing this is too much. We have to simplify this, and we have to look at what are the most important pieces of healing, which is obviously things like you need to oxygenate the brain. You need to make sure the blood is as clean as possible, work on the liver, work on the gut. That's it. I mean, it's simple. And of course, remove toxins from the home. That was one of the later steps I did because I was still clinging to my Clorox because I grew up that way. But I didn't realize that was actually causing his so-called asthma.
I love that you're sharing the changes that you made along the way. Like you'd start something, and if it wasn't the right fit, you were willing to adapt and change course.
You have to listen to that intuition. And I mean, again, I come from a standpoint of we've done it for our son. We have healed our child. Make sure that you're working with people and getting advice from people who actually have done it and who know the pros and the cons and the good and the bad. Because again, you can go to the best doctor in the world. Well, did they heal their child? Do they actually know all of these intricacies and nuances? And I just keep coming back to, it's simple. We've got to simplify it. The overwhelming part should not be the supplements that your child is taking. That should be very simple. The overwhelming part really should just be you working through your own junk, the emotional part. That's the challenging part, but that's also very doable, of course, to move to the other side of healing, because when we heal, our child heals. So I noticed through the process that as I was working through a lot of the anger I had towards the pediatrician, the neurologist, the shame that I felt, because shame is very different than guilt, as I started to heal that in myself and heal my body, I didn't realize how bad I was eating. I didn't realize how out of whack my hormones were from all the toxins I was putting on myself and the fragrances and all the things. So as I started healing, interesting, my child started to respond better, right? But when I was in a bad place, if I had a bad day, or if I was sitting in misery and beating myself up, guess what? My child kind of regressed, right? There's this energetic cord that we carry with our children. So we have to heal ourselves alongside our children too, and the whole family. We all did gaps. We all changed how we approached life and what we had in the home and what we ate and all of that. So yeah, there was a point in that process where I needed to do a big pivot because he had made some gains. He was doing well, but there was something still missing. And the piece of it was he was on way too many things that didn't make sense for him. So I pared that down. That's actually when I found a piece of the puzzle I was missing, which was essential oils and certain pieces of that oxygenate the brain really quickly and really well. And so we pared all of that down, we simplified it and did a different approach. And then we implemented the raw camel milk, which I found, and he just took off like a rocket. It was incredible, the gains that he had and the healing that he experienced. But this was over the course of 3 to 4 years though. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's where parents need to understand that too, is you're going to have these peaks and these valleys. The goal is, with young kids, I say, they're most malleable before the age of 6. So the most that you can do before the age of 6 is important. It's absolutely important. It doesn't mean that an older child can't heal. They absolutely can. An adult with a diagnosis can heal. I mean, people heal every single day of autoimmune diseases and cancer and all these things that they say you cannot heal from. But when you're going through this process, most of the time it starts at 2, because that's their magic number, is they want to, all of a sudden it's ooh, you turn 2, you have autism. Like, does that even make sense? Right? But that's how they dupe parents into, well, that's just when it tends to happen at 2 because we can see the markers at 2. No, you could have seen the markers when they were a day old and got the hepatitis B shot when they were like hours old in the hospital, right? So at 2 is usually where this can happen. You know, a parent gets a diagnosis, they either go down this road of believing the lies and going in that camp of misery loves company, I call it, where you're with all the other people that have children with a label and you just go, oh, it'll be okay. I know it's hard today, mama. I know. Or you go this road where you go, I'm going to buck the system and I'm going to heal my child. So it takes, you know, there's a long timeline there, but in our mind, I feel like a lot of times we go, well, it should take 6 months. Or, oh, well, why isn't my child healed yet? I just started this protocol 2 weeks ago. Why aren't they healed yet? No, it takes time to unravel damage and to sort of reconstruct the body for the long term. So, I mean, this was years that we were doing this.
Yeah. Wow. I really appreciate you sharing just your, I don't know, the growth that you had, I think, like in where you were at. I'm just that first story you told us about just being kind of paralyzed in the pediatrician's office to where you are now, not just helping your own family, but helping so many others. Can you give some advice to people who are learning? I mean, I feel like the road you've taken and that my family has taken, and my experience as well, it's been really difficult at times to speak out boldly for your own beliefs and the choices that you've made for your family. And so I guess, how do you gather that courage in yourself and speak out boldly for the health of your family?
Yeah, I feel like, you know, that's such a good question to bring up, because when it comes to using your voice and what I call like standing in the gap for your child. So that means you have this over here, which is all the noise and the world and the negative people. And guess what? That's friends and family sometimes.
Yep.
That's a lot of times family that just doesn't understand what you're doing because they are so entrenched in the system, and they literally cannot fathom the fact that the system could harm your child.
Yeah.
They think all of this is set up to keep you healthy and to keep you safe. And so you get a lot of it actually from family. I feel like in the beginning, most people don't tend to go straight to social media and start speaking out, because that's very, very scary, because that's when you start to get a lot of the random trolls and the hatred. So when you stand in the gap, it's like you're literally the firewall. You're the brick wall between all this noise and your child over here that needs help, that is counting on you to heal them. And I know that sounds really strong, but that really is, in essence, what is happening is your child is helpless, truly helpless. Your child is counting on you to stand in the gap and to be that voice for them. In the very beginning, the first step is understanding what it means to stand in the gap. I think that's the very first step, because if you can just stand in the gap for your child every day, you are using your voice without even knowing it. When you have somebody in your family that says, oh, come on, honey, like, listen, this will be the grandparents. Every time it's the grandparents. Oh, honey, can't he just have a little piece of bread and some goldfish crackers? Oh, come on, it's not going to hurt him. How can you keep him from ice cream? Like, the grandmas, right? They just don't understand. And so you have to know that they're coming from a different place in life. They're not trying to say that to make you sound like you're crazy. They truly just don't understand. And so that's where you start to begin to grow. Your resolve is actually with family and friends first. And I always tell people, I recommend, in my experience, because we went through this with family where we had to do some boundaries, is that you're not trying to convince anybody of anything. You will actually never convince somebody that vaccines are poison if they're not willing to see that themselves. You have to continue to do what you know is right for your child and put those boundaries up. And so if grandma is saying that. And I go, oh, I know. Wouldn't it be so nice if he could have some ice cream? But you know what? It actually would make him sick. It actually would make him sick. And I just really don't want him to get sick right now. Like, you have to do it in a way that they understand.
Yeah.
And through your actions is how they come along. And that's how my family came along. So we have much more impacts than we realize. For the majority of people, your voice is within your bubble of advocating for your child in therapy or advocating for them in school, advocating for them with family members. Like, that's really where you're using your voice.
Yeah, I agree. I have found that knowledge and, educating myself and doing my own research, like, those are the kinds of things that have given me more confidence. And then also just the level, because you become more educated and knowledgeable, you care more about the outcomes because you know what the outcomes of going one way or the other would be. And so for me, I'm just like, well, I really care more about a positive outcome for my child than I do about what all these people think of me. So in the end, that's kind of the choice that I had to make, like, every day. Am I going to choose what I know is going to be the best outcome for my kid, or pleasing all these people that have random opinions about me,
Really good way that I share this with parents is I go, who is going to be up with your child at 2:00 in the morning?
True.
Random troll on social media, the pediatrician, even a family member. Who is going to have to come to your child's rescue? Nobody but you.
Yeah.
Nobody but you. So
true. Yeah. So what are some first steps that you would recommend for parents listening that have a child with a chronic illness or a debilitating diagnosis or anything like that? What would you recommend as steps that they could take to try and help their child?
So the first step, actually the very first step, and we've kind of touched on this a little bit, is really working through that emotional part first. This doesn't have to take long, but meaning you're just recognizing, oh, I'm carrying some shame and guilt. And is that stopping me from making the changes I know I need to make to help my child heal? And that's why in my book, the Autism Reimagined book, the very first chapter actually tackles shame, because that's so important. Because even if somebody has all the desire in the world, I see this all the time. It's almost like a psychological thing we do to ourselves where we want our child to heal. Like, we actually really do want that. But it becomes so hard that we rationalize ourselves out of it, and we tell ourselves lies, or we believe lies, so that then we don't have to do that work. So that emotional part is actually the very beginning process, is working through and identifying, do I feel guilt and shame over this? And I'm going to release that, and I'm going to let go of that. And what's most important right now is that we heal. So that's the first step. The second step always is doing a assessment of the lifestyle. What I have found in many conversations is I'll ask the first question, I'm so curious, what does your child eat? And what I'll get back is, oh, we eat generally healthy. What does that mean?
Yeah.
Right? So this is, again, in this world we live in, we will label a grouping of things as, well, we eat pretty healthy, which means, for the most part, in our fast-paced, sad American diet world, that they're probably going through the drive-thru a couple times a week. They're probably cooking with processed oils. They're probably consuming a high amount of gluten, because that is the number one root cause problem of every single illness today, is hybridized wheat, not eating good fats and being duped into the fact that fat is bad for you still, and it's high in sugar. So those are your root problems. And so then you start to look at a child's diet, and even if they say, well, we eat generally healthy, you start to peel back those layers and you look at, well, actually their diet is like 80% carbs, minimal protein, and very little good fat, and a lot of sugar, because sugar is hidden in all of those carbs and all of the condiments and all of the fast food and all of that stuff. So very honest assessment of food is your first step, and changing and adjusting that to be very high in good fats and protein, still having your complex carbohydrates, but from a non-hybridized source. So that's going to be more of your healthier grains, your einkorn, spelt, your fermented sourdough. I'm not against grains. Like, we need to have carbs in us, but it's just the type and how your body utilizing those. And also the fact that, there's kind of this fear of giving your kids too much protein, which is interesting to me because it's not the protein that's the problem. It's the fact that they don't have enough fat in them to convert the protein in their body. So your two main things is high fat and high protein. And then looking at your home, right? So one of the biggest root causes of why children supposedly have this epidemic of asthma and allergies is because of everything in the home. The plug-ins, the bleach, the fragrances, the products that they're using, the Dreft laundry detergent that is pediatrician recommended. It's all of that stuff. So if you start with those three areas, and that's not even getting yet into like intentional supplementation, which is very needed, but it's intentional, not overwhelming. That is where you start. And just by changing those environments alone of food and what is in your home, children heal.
Yeah, I think anyone would benefit from that so much.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we have an epidemic today of women who have massive estrogen dominance. That is actually the problem of their hormone. They do not have hormonal dysfunction. They are not broken. They do not have bad genetics. No, my friend, you have too much estrogen in your body.
Right.
And the estrogen is coming from all of the 300 chemicals a woman puts on their body before they leave for the day.
Yep, I agree. So good. This has all been so good. I have 3 questions that I ask every guest at the end of the podcast. And the first one is, what healthy living resource would you recommend? And so I would love if you could just share your resources for this, actually. Like, well, how can people connect with you? How can people work with you and learn from you?
I do have, obviously, my Autism Reimagined book that is, I think, a start for anybody who has a child that is not thriving. And it is, obviously, our story is very rooted in autism, but this is for literally everything. It's a foundation for healthy, like just being healthy. So I have that. And then the Warrior Center is a really cool little membership space I have where I have all of my courses. I help people one-on-one in there. They can ask questions. We have monthly Zoom calls where you can get on with me and ask your questions. So it's a membership space where I can speak freely and not worry about my stuff being deleted or lost. And it's the real info, like the real deal info. And I have an autism course in there that walks people through the whole healing process and all of that stuff. And then I am coming out with a new book called Reclaim Motherhood. So that should be coming out hopefully for pre-sale within the next month.
Awesome.
That's basically going to be your handbook and your resource from prior to birth all the way through, I would say, like young adulthood, with all the questions that I've been asked over the years. And it's like your handbook. It answers all of them. It gives people tips and ideas of what to do. So that will be coming. And the only other thing I would say is really, you do have to be careful of information nowadays, because it's almost crafted in a way on purpose to intentionally confuse and paralyze parents. So you just got to be real mindful, because even in the natural health space can become very noisy, to where if you're following 50 million different people, you're actually going to walk away more confused. So you have to really hone in on what you want to do for your child or for yourself.
It's true. Yeah. What are some healthy snacks that you love for you or your family?
We actually do a lot of real food. So snacks for us.
Absolutely.
Oftentimes it's just a snack tray, which is vegetables and fruit and maybe some homemade ranch dip. If we do dairy, we do raw cheese. So we do still love cheese, but we just do raw cheese when we need to. And we've obviously gone through a long process of healing the gut. And that's the idea, is you want to get to the point where the gut is strong and healed enough that it's not like you can't go out to eat. You just are very mindful of how your body feels. And, over the years, I can't even sit down and eat a big plate of food at a restaurant that I used to. I used to clean my plate. I sit down and have about 10 bites and I'm full. Like, that's how much your body changes when it's in healing mode. And it has gone through that process of healing the gut. Is you know how something's going to make you feel. And so you start to make better decisions and choices, and you're more in tune to your body. But anyways, we do a lot of fruits, vegetables, protein, meat. We do a lot of protein shakes with like a very clean protein that we use. We might put, fruit in there or something like that. We like the little Think bars, which is like kind of the fruit bars. We do a lot of raw nuts. We do, like my kids just love eating fermented sourdough every day. They could eat a loaf of it a day, and sometimes they do, but it's fine because it's fermented, it's organic, it's healthy. There's no hybridized wheat in there. So they do love, making a grilled cheese sandwich with that or something. So yeah, just a lot of real food is what's in my house, because if you don't bring it in your house, then it's not going to be temptation, right? You are the gatekeeper. We are the gatekeeper. So it doesn't mean we don't ever go out to eat. Obviously we do occasionally, but it's not something that is super common for us.
Yeah, I agree. Those are great. Awesome suggestions. And who would you love to see as a guest on the Daily Wellness Podcast?
I'm really seeing, and I'm having a passion for this too, of kind of the lie that women have been told for a very long time, that they are infertile and that they just need to go spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on IVF treatment and all this stuff. So I would interview Ayla Cuenca, because she's awesome as it comes to the birthing, just the whole birthing like talk and fertility, and that women are not broken. And honestly, the IVF industry is just as corrupt as any other industry that is a $1 billion industry, basically preying on women and their emotions that they can't get pregnant when really they can.
Good. Awesome. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate you. Thanks for listening to today's episode on the Daily Wellness Podcast. We hope that you found it helpful for your own wellness journey. And if so, we'd love for you to leave a review. Then come back and listen for review shoutouts on upcoming episodes. For more information, check out the show notes and connect with us on our website, dailywellnesscommunity.com.